stuff that should kind of last forever. So durable gear is available for all LAM members to borrow, whether or not it's official LAM trip. Non-durable gear is for official LAM trips only, and that's why we categorize them. LAM trips can reserve gear up to a year in advance of a trip. Individuals can reserve up to 30 days. And of course, it's first come, first serve as far as reservations. And like Bill said, our gear collection has evolved, and it's been based on what people want and actually use. And not to steal anybody's thunder, but the next part of the presentation today is trips that people have, LAM trips that people have conducted, participated in this summer, and we actually loaned gear for at least 3 of those trips. So durable equipment, this isn't a complete list, but it gives you an idea, and I'm not going to read it to you. We will have all of this. We have some of it on our website. We'll have all of it on our website soon. The only sort of funny thing, why are climbing shoes considered durable? The answer is because we don't pay for them. They're all been donations, retired shoes, shoes didn't fit, people's, activities change. And we have quite a good shoe selection, except it's gotten somehow deficient in the larger sizes. So if anybody's got shoes they'd like to donate, I'll be happy to take them. And then non-durable equipment is soft stuff, basically. And we'll have, like I said, a list of this. I'll ask if there's any questions, but I'd like to keep this really short. Yes.
Kai, I think one recent change has been about borrowing club gear for private trips.
That's right. So, I mean, we can get into why we reverted that.
There's a change.
Right. That's right.
Do you mind repeating that into the mic so people?
Oh, sorry. Yes, part of this new policy is a reversion of some policy that the board enacted a year or so ago. It had unintended consequences, and so we undid it. So this is actually a more generous policy than we have had. I mean, I could go into more detail, but people don't want to hear it. We'll put it on the website. Any other questions? No? And then I guess somebody's going to talk about trips. Jeff, click.
Thanks, Kai. Okay, club trips for June. We had quite a few trips this month. Climbing school graduate outings at Gallows Ed and Los Conchas on May 27th and June 11th, led by Norbert Esslin. And across those 2 gatherings, we had 17 participants. Thank you very much to Norbert for organizing those. Those were very successful. There's Kai out there belaying. And then, and I apologize, I don't have a picture for this. I got many today, but I wasn't at home at all today to be able to get them uploaded. This is a trip that Bill led, Pajarito, a mountain down into the Valle Caldera, and then up north to Pipeline Road, and connecting back via Cañada Bonita. And that was a successful trip on the 29th of May. Second session in Knott's on May 31st. It's not a trip, but I thought really wanted to mention that and thank Kai for organizing that. That was a great success. We had 10 students and 5 instructors. And they went through all of the Knott's curriculum and had some time to spare. So thanks, Kai, for that, and those that participated, instructors and students. Sylvie led a trip, the Banco Bonito Loop bike and hike on June 3rd. And we had Sylvie and Jean and David Schmidt and Jan Velichowski and Kent Candy hike that. And there's some pictures from that. It's just lush out there right now. I was just at Pajarito Mountain just 2 days ago, and the columbines were just all totally in bloom on the west side on top of I Don't Care. And you can see just tons of flowers out there in the bayou right now. hmm Pajarito Gorge Climbing School for graduates on June 4th. Do we know if this trip made it? I didn't hear back from Dan. Anyone know? That was a canyoneering excursion, at least planned by Dan Kreveling. And then Ann Sitsangi led a Santa Fe Baldy backpack just this past weekend. And we had Carrie and Jan and Veronica, Martin, Joe, and Ann all participated in that. And they camped at Puerto Nambe and did multiple day hikes up to Santa Fe Baldy, Spirit Lake, and Lake Catherine. So that was a great outing. It looks like they had great weather up there as well. And future Mountaineers Club trips. We still have the hiking and fishing in the Upper Conejos Valley. I believe that's full. Is there a wait list on that, Bill?
No, not really.
Okay, so it's open still.
The wait list is open. I wouldn't be too optimistic.
Okay. He said wait list is open, but he's not very optimistic about openings for that. A 10th Mountain Hut trip to Skinner Hut. That's a hike and bike on July 30th to August 2nd. And that frequently has folks that drop out. It's a good sized group at the very last minute. And so if you're interested in that, contact Kathleen Grutzmacher is leading that. Gates of the Arctic National Park, Tanya Pietras is leading that. Middle Fork of the Salmon Raft trip with music in September. Another trip that Bill is leading. And walking tour of Italy in late September that Bill's also leading, and the annual Moab Bike Hike and Explore in November. All right, so we've got some good trips coming up. As Bill noted, we have lots of trips that folks post with kind of short notice in the summer as the weather's really inviting and lots of opportunities for that. I'm probably going to be planning a trip to do the Truchas Peaks in September or late August. That trip is a lot longer now that they've gated the main entry into the trailhead, so that adds about 6 miles round trip to that. So that'll be probably a 15 or 16 mile trip. But that, and I'm going to organize some hikes leading up to that, so for some training for folks to build up to that. But that's one of my favorite places to go. And an invitation to future trip leaders. Please consider leading one trip this year. Simple day trips are the easiest way to start. Please contact me if you have any questions or any interest in doing that. No trip is too small. If it's something you'd be interested in doing, there's inevitably people in the club that would like to join you. And without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Jean to introduce our speaker. Thank you.
Actually, I'm going to jump in right before Jean and give just a few logistics for the presentation tonight. So our presenter is going to be taking questions via Zoom chat and from our in-person audience. And they've chosen to open it to questions throughout their presentation tonight. So for those of you watching from home, you can find the chat feature on your Zoom app and in the menu bar probably. Type your questions to the Peak moderator in the chat window anytime during the talk, and then I'll read them out to our presenter. Please remember that not everyone in the room here with us has a microphone, so there may be a delay when we're listening to a question from the live audience, but don't worry, we'll be back on in a second, and our presenter will repeat the question for everybody to hear. All right, I'm going to throw it back to Jean to introduce Rick for tonight. Thank you.
And Rick gave me permission to give a very short safety share. This last week, Rick gave me permission to do a very short safety share. This last week, I saw a waiver. We ask on all Mountaineers trips to fill out a waiver at the start of the trip to give your emergency contact information. And For the 5 participants, I could read 2 of the people's information, and 3 of the people wrote in such a way that I could not read their emergency contact or the emergency contact phone number. And so if there had been an event, it would have been very difficult to contact people's families. And so take the extra 5 seconds to print legibly. It's important for us. So, and now it's my very great pleasure to introduce Rick Rubio. Rick moved to our Los Alamos, New Mexico area about a year ago, and he is a person filled with joy for the out of doors. He is an accomplished mountaineer, an accomplished skier, an accomplished outdoor safety professional, an accomplished sea kayaker. Anytime you talk to Rick, you're going to want to do that thing because he has such joy for it. A recent trip in the fall of last year was to climb a couple of the Mexican volcanoes. So he has this just wealth of knowledge, background, and great love for the outdoors. And in addition to his outdoor adventures, he's an engineer and has been involved for years in building and designing his own outdoor gear and clothing. And so tonight at dinner, we determined that it may be 4 to be the prime number of sewing machines that you need to own, but it's rumored that Rick has had more. With this, Rick Rubio.
Thanks, Gene. That was too kind. A little bit exaggerated, but thank you. Okay, my turn? All right, how's everybody doing tonight? So I know it's hot out there, but I'm going to talk about skiing. I hope that's okay with you guys. I did this trip called the Haute route in the Alps about 5 years ago, and it was the most incredible ski trip I've ever been on. And I hope we have a lot of skiers here tonight who can share that joy. So anyway, here we go. Just to give you an idea of where on the map this is, let's see here. Here's the town of Chamonix, France. This was our starting point, and the goal was to make it to Zermatt over here on the right, and roughly following this red line here, and you might see that there's a gap between here and here, and that's the reason for taking a shuttle from I forget the name of this town here, but to the ski town of Verbier. Okay, and we'll get in more details here. And there are many ways to do this traverse, and the particular one that we did is called the Verbier Ski Tour Variation. It maximizes the skiing as opposed to mountaineering. So why would you want to do this? Well, it's the Alps. For me, I had never seen the Alps, and for me, it was just an awesome mountain range. I'm used to the Eastern Sierra in California, and we have some incredible mountains there. We have some incredible mountains around here too, in Colorado especially, but the Alps are different. It actually has huge seracs, giant glaciers, ice falls, the kind of stuff you would see in the Himalaya. Ice cliffs and sometimes powder. We didn't see any powder, but it was still really good. And they also have a really incredible hut system. So you can do this trip carrying nothing but day gear. You go to the hut, they have a bed for you, they have dinner, breakfast, and so you get to enjoy the skiing and not have to carry a big backpack. And there's just wild terrain, and you don't have to be an expert skier to do this trip. If you can ski intermediate slopes, you can do this trip. And of course, you have to be fit. Now, they call them huts, but they're not really huts. They're more like little fortresses. And the huts will provide bed and blankets, and you need to bring a sleeping bag liner. and the sleeping arrangements are pretty Spartan. Sometimes they have fairly nice bunk beds, a bunk bed for everyone. But I remember this one hut where the bed was this big platform that the entire team shared. So we were shoulder to shoulder. I was sleeping next to Sue, and Kyle next to me was snoring real loud. They might be in the audience. I won't say too much. And food, the food is generally very good, especially when we were in the French Alps. I remember the first dinner we had, the chef brought out this big platter of some kind of lamb dish and rice, and it was really good. And wine, and let's see here. Now the bathrooms are, let's say, pretty primitive. So don't expect nice bathrooms with running hot water. There were a couple of bathrooms where the water wasn't working for whatever reason, but let me see here. Yeah, I mentioned that they're called huts, but they're really much more substantial than huts. These are big buildings that are up on, typically up on a rocky cliff, because everywhere is glacier, so it's all moving. So the huts have to be built on something solid, and that's why they're up on a cliff, typically. Okay, enough of that. Typical ski day, we get up early in the morning. Usually it's not an alpine start. We didn't have any 3 a.m. starts, but we did have some starts where we had to use headlamps for the first couple hours, maybe first half hour. And you have breakfast in the hut. Then you gather your gear in the gear room. There's a gear room where you leave your sharps like ice axes and crampons and shovels and stuff you won't need in your room, and your skis, of course. And you hang up your skins up in the gear room. And so you collect all that stuff, and then you ski down to the first transition where you typically put your skins on and you start going uphill. And depending on the terrain, there are going to be several transitions where you might put your skins on so you can start skinning. And then if it gets steeper, you might have to put on your ski crampons. And if it gets really steep, you throw your skis on your back and you put your boot crampons on and transition to mountaineering mode, where you're cramponing up and using an ice axe. And sometimes the terrain gets kind of more technical, where there might be crevasses. So that's when you rope up. But we practiced all of this before going on the real tour, especially skiing with while roped up. You don't want to run over the rope and risk cutting it. So there's a technique to it. But the guides will show you how to do that. And the skiing is typically finished early in the afternoon, and you head to the hut, and that's when you relax, you rehydrate, you eat, and usually everybody's too tired to do anything else. There were a few days where the option was there to go ski up something else and then ski down, but usually everybody was too tired to do that. And then in the evening, we have dinner, and there might be a guide briefing after dinner so we can discuss what the plan is for the next day, if there's any weather to worry about or anything like that. And then we go to bed early. Okay, so this is the group that I was with. The person who took the picture is named Miles Smart. He was the local guide in Chamonix who partnered with Howie Schwartz, our guide from Bishop, California. And there were two couples. One is Jim and Sue King of Lake Crowley, California. They live up at high elevation, and they regularly go out on snow surveys. So they're out there all the time. And the reason I'm saying this is when I saw the roster, it was a little bit intimidating. So me and my friend Kyle and Nyan there, and there's me, we're all from Los Angeles, California, basically at sea level. And all these guys live at elevation. And not only that, Nancy Fiddler and Claude Fiddler there. They live in Lake Crowley, California, at high elevation. And not only that, Nancy is a professional skier. She was on an Olympic team, Nordic skiing team, and Claude, he's a climbing legend. If anyone here is a climbing historian, you might have come across the name Claude Fiddler. He had a lot of first ascents in Yosemite Valley. He wrote a bunch of guidebooks, and I once looked up his name in my old Yosemite guidebook, and he's all over the place. And let's see, did I miss anyone? That's Jim. I mentioned Jim and Sue and Nancy and Claude and Nyan and Kyle and Howie and Miles. I think that's everybody. Okay. Okay, so logistics. First, we flew to Geneva, Switzerland, and then took a shuttle to Chamonix, France. And my friend Kyle and I got there a few days early so we could acclimate and get over jet lag. And so we explored Chamonix, checked out the tourist attractions, and skied the resort a little bit. And here we are enjoying the food in France, and the food was good. And we did the tourist thing. We took the tram up to the famous Aiguille du Midi. Not really saying that right, but this is right near Mont Blanc and Chamonix. And this is the very top of the feature there. It looks like a rocket ship, and you get awesome views of the Alps. And then the following day, we spent a day skiing the resort, doing some downhill skiing just to get acclimated. And after that, we met with the rest of the group to go on a shakedown day tour to get everything dialed in. The guides did an equipment check to make sure we weren't carrying too much stuff. And the purpose of the day tour was to get accustomed to the terrain and to practice skinning, transitions, and rope travel, like I mentioned before, and to acclimate some more. So in this photo here, we went back to Aiguille du Midi, and the first part of that, we had to go down this icy track here, and that's the reason for the rope. Miles brought out the rope. We were in boot crampons, and we had to go down this icy thing, and then we got down to this flat area and put our skins on so we could start the tour. And there was some incredible snow, and lots of fun skiing. For lunch, we stopped at this hut. So we're in France, right? And then we go to this hut, we go in, and they're speaking Italian. So it turns out we had crossed the border into Italy, and we had lunch there. Great food. And the following day, we started the actual tour. We started from this town called Argentière, which was close to Chamonix. We took a shuttle there, and then took a tram up, and then started skinning. And the goal was to go to the Albert Premier Hut, which wasn't too far away because we had a kind of a late start getting doing the shuttle thing and all that. And it was a beautiful, perfect, windless blue sky day. We did have to take our skis off and go into mountaineering mode, put boot crampons on and ice axe, and we had to boot up this couloir, and nothing really hard or technical. It was fun. And shortly after that, we made it to the hut. We had some great snow, skied right down to the hut, and time to relax for the day. The following day was another gorgeous day, and the goal was to go to the next hut, which is called the Montfort Hut. If anybody has any comments or questions, just interrupt me. Again, another beautiful day of just skinning and skiing the downhills.
So one quick question from online, Rick. How heavy were your packs when traveling hut to hut?
The packs were fairly light. We had avid gear, shovel, probe, food for the day, water for the day. So, and clothing, all the clothing that we would need for the whole week. So I would say no more than 25 pounds. And it's like the weight of a typical day pack for day hiking. And not enough to really feel it when you're skiing downhill. Okay, so typical day, you ski down, put your skins on and ski up. When it gets too steep, you switch to boot crampons, and you keep doing that until you get to your destination. But along the way, there was some incredible scenery that it's hard to capture in photos. You can get an idea of how big or how small the packs are from this photo here. Okay, this is where we hit the end of the trail, so to speak, and we had to take a shuttle to the ski town of Verbier, and here we are having lunch in the town before we got on the tram to get back on the snow. So we took the tram up in the ski town of Verbier and did a little bit of skiing, and then the actual hut was in the resort, so that was a fairly easy day.
So sometimes you carried your lunch, and sometimes you were able to go to a hut for lunch.
The question is, sometimes we carried our lunch and sometimes we had lunch at the hut. Actually, this was the only time during the actual tour that we had lunch that we didn't carry. That other time was during a day tour, that shakedown tour. And all the other times we would get lunch at the hut in the morning, and they would pack a lunch for us. Yes.
So another question from online. Were those your own skis that you brought over, or were they provided?
I brought my own skis. Other people chose to rent their skis in Chamonix, but it's something you have to do beforehand to make sure you can get the equipment that you want. But there are many ski shops in Chamonix.
Just one more before you move on.
Okay.
What are the dates here? What months were you skiing there?
Oh, okay. This was in April in 2018, so spring. So we got to the hut, and again, time to relax and enjoy a little happy hour and rehydrate and rest up for the next day skiing. And more of the same thing, just more beautiful scenery and awesome skiing, doing a little bit of skinning and cramponing. On this day, we climbed to the summit of Rosa Blanche. It's a mountaintop. I forget the elevation. It's not super high and not technical, but we did crampon up and carried our skis up. And you can barely see the end goal. There's Zermatt. That's the Matterhorn. Okay, on this day, well, first of all, here's an incredible view from the top. We could see the Matterhorn here, which is a couple of days away. And coming off the peak, I could tell that Howie was looking at this couloir and I could tell he really wanted to ski it. So the cool thing was we had two guides, and let's see, 8 clients and 2 guides. No, 7 clients and 2 guides. So the guides had a little discussion and decided that Howie would lead whoever wants to go down this couloir, and the other group would just ski down an easier way, and we'll meet up at the hut. So, of course, I couldn't pass that up, and and so it was Nyan, Kyle. Oh, I forgot Jenna in the beginning. I forgot to introduce her. So Jenna also, she lives at high elevation, grew up in Mammoth, so we knew that she was an awesome skier, and she was. So the four of us, plus Howie, chose to ski down this couloir, and it was good. It was really good until we got to the second half, and the snow was challenging. Because it had been hot, and the snow was pretty rotten, and there were some minor crevasses that we had to avoid too. But other than that, it was a really fun ski. The real price to pay, though, was we had to go back up, not up the couloir, but because we lost so much elevation to get to the hut, we had to go up and up and up, and I was out of water, and it was hot. But it was well worth it. And we made it back to the hut, and got there and chowed down and rested again for the next day.
What kind of temperature is it like if you're outside the hut here?
Oh, the question is what kind of temperatures we had outside the hut. It was, yeah, sometimes it would be 50 degrees. Maybe it got as cold as just below freezing when we were up high and we started seeing some weather. But otherwise, I was wearing a soft shell jacket and soft shell pants, and never had to pull out my hard shell until the very last day when it was really stormy. So typical spring skiing. Okay.
So the other folks that are at the hut, what kinds of trips were they doing? Were they also doing tours, or are they doing, staying at a hut multiple days and doing day tours? Can you describe some of the other activities?
Sure. So the question was, what were the other folks doing who were staying at the hut? Were they on a similar trip as us, or doing something else? So we were all skiers, and there are variations in the Haute route, and so some of them might have been doing a slightly different variation, but in general, we were all headed towards Zermatt. Yeah. So day 4, the goal was to get to this hut called the Dick's Hut, and I made that note there just to remind me to mention this. I won't mention names, but I acted with the pictures a little bit backwards. We started from the Dick's Hut and then skied down, and then we got to the flat spot where it was time to put skins on, so we start skiing uphill, and somebody on our team goes, "Uh-oh, I don't have my skins," and oh shit, I left them at the hut. And so that's another advantage of having 2 guides. The guides just kind of looked at each other, and Howie just put his skins on, clicked into his skis, starts skiing uphill, and Miles, the other guide, pulls out his rope and ties this person in and says, "Okay, you're walking behind me." and I understood later the reason for that is that when you're on skis, that gives you some protection against crevasses. The skis will distribute your weight on the snow, so you're less likely to fall into a crevasse. But when you're on foot, you don't have that, and that's why that person got tied into the rope. So it all worked out. We all met up later, maybe a couple hours later. But if we had one guide, then it would have been a real problem. It would have taken hours to recover from that mistake. So it turns out that Howie, the lead guide, is a very accomplished bluegrass musician. There was a guitar at the Dick's hut, and of course he had to play it and did a little concert for everybody. So I mentioned having briefings with a guide, and we had been watching this weather system for several days. And so after dinner, the guides got us in a meeting and said, we have bad weather coming. We need to make some backup plans. One possibility is to bail out in the morning. We can go to a lower valley and then maybe go to a ski resort and do something else, ski the resort. Because there's this weather pattern coming in. It's called the Foon wind. It's a well-known weather pattern in the Alps that can happen. And it can bring winds, 75-mile-an-hour winds. And when you're up high, it can be really, really nasty. So that was option one, bail out in the morning. Option two was, let's check the weather in the morning. If it looks okay, let's push on to the next hut. So we chose option two. And so the next day we pushed on to the next hut. And the weather was fine in the morning. In the afternoon, though, let's see here. Oh, it was still good. It was still good during midday. But in the afternoon, I remember we were going down the slope that was fairly icy, and the visibility was getting kind of low. And I remember even I was doing some snow plowing just to get off that hill. So it started getting challenging. Okay, let's see here. Can you guys see that hut there? Okay, so we had to go from where Howie is standing to that hut. So you can see it's doesn't look simple, right? And this is a view from the hut. So this is what stood between Howie and the hut, these ice cliffs here. And they looked really, really scary. But Miles knew exactly where to go, because he's the local guy, and he has done this route many times, and he showed us where to go, and we just followed his instructions, and not a big deal. I mention this because not everybody was this lucky. So I'm just showing the plaque at the Vignette's hut there, and then the following morning, this is what it looked like outside. It's hard to tell from a still picture, but this netting here, this is a helicopter platform. The netting was flapping like crazy, super windy. And that morning, there was no discussion about what to do. We were bailing out. That was it. End of the trip. And I remember opening the door with skis in one hand, and the wind caught my skis and just almost ripped them out of my hands. The wind was so strong. So because of the weather, we aborted the mission. That wasn't our plan. If the weather got nasty, we would bail out. And we just skied down this valley. 1 day short. So, yeah. Go ahead.
How did you manage to get around the ice cliffs getting to the hut?
The question was, how did we manage to get around the ice cliffs? And I just remember thinking, if it was me, I would not know where to go. And, you know, if it wasn't for the guide, I would not know where to go. And this was in perfect weather, you know, with perfect visibility. And I remember this little gap that we went through, and the guide said, go that way. And then I could see some tracks, and I followed the tracks. And it was a simple traverse, but there was that one spot that if you missed it, you'd be lost.
So did you stay on skis the whole time?
Yeah, we did stay on skis the whole time. And the key was just knowing where that little passage was. And then it became okay. Go ahead.
Okay, so someone asked, how did this group get together? Was it just a coincidence that you had this amazing, talented group?
So I recall that it was Nyan who sent me an email, I think, and said, "Do you want to go on this Haute route?" And I didn't even know what it was. I had to Google it, and I saw what it was and said, "Yeah, I'm in." And so the three of us, Nyan, Kyle, and me, are ski friends, climbing friends. So we've known each other for years, and so and then I remember the next time I was up in Mammoth, we met with Howie, Nyan and I, and Howie, because he wanted to check me out too, to see if I was qualified to do this trip. And so he gave me the thumbs up. And so later on, we got the roster with the other 5 people, and that's how we all got together. So we skied down to Arola. Oh, I wanted to mention that the wind, as we were bailing out, the wind was just howling down this valley, pushing us down. And at one point, we had to do a clothing adjustment because it was getting warmer. And Nyan took off his jacket, the wind caught it, and poof, it was gone. But miraculously, later on that day, about an hour later, we found it. We were all hoping that it was gone forever because it was this wild, bright green color that everybody hated. I don't think Nyan's in the audience, so there you go, Nyan. Okay, so we made it to Arola at a cafe, and yeah, we kind of did it, but not really. We were a day short. So we started making plans right away to get back to Zermatt, but so far it hasn't happened yet. So maybe I'll do a trip if anyone's interested. So, okay. This is the downer of the presentation. It turns out there was another group behind us who weren't so lucky. A group of 10 skiers, and 7 of them died. And I'll go into details in the following slides and discuss what happened, because it really bugged me after we found out how how so many skiers can die from such a what seems like a fairly simple trip with all the safety of the huts, and it's only the Alps, but it turns out that kind of attitude is what contributed to the accident. It's only the Alps. So later on, I came across this article from Outside Magazine that wrote about the accident, but for a long time there wasn't anything I could find. And it's very unfortunate, but the other thing is, let's see here. Do you remember this hut here, this view? It turns out they were right about here, stuck on the ridge, pinned down by the weather. And they were really exhausted because they had been fighting the weather all day long and getting lost and going in circles, and not having enough snow to even dig in to dig a snow cave. And they just froze to death.
They were just
And-
one day from you.
Yeah.
One day after you.
Yeah.
So the day that you were skiing out, aborting, they were trying to make it to the side.
Right. That's correct. So Robin pointed out that they were 24 hours behind us. So on that day that we were bailing out towards Arola, they were coming in from the Dick's hut, from the hut where we were the day or the day before. Yeah. And why they didn't why they didn't bail out like we did, hard to say, but there are some clues after they interviewed the survivors, and I'll go into that a little bit later. But the sad thing was they were approximately at this location, and they could see the lights in our hut that night, and there was no way to notify us. They didn't have a satellite phone, so they couldn't call out. They couldn't navigate through that tricky traverse that we did, because as I was saying, even in perfect weather, it's not obvious where to go. So being in a whiteout, there was no way. They had no chance. So this paragraph in the article talks about, this is actually our trip that they're talking about in the article. Miles Smart is the local guide that we had along with Howie. And yeah, the other party was 24 hours behind us. And he mentions the foon wind. And so Miles also mentions that, yeah, it's a especially strong wind, and that we had been watching it all week long. And all the parties knew about the weather. At the Dick's hut, that's the last hut before the accident where they were, there was an iPad on the counter showing the weather 24/7. So they knew about it. They knew about the weather. So this is my own analysis of what happened and what could have been done to avoid the accident. And I put questions here because the guy died. He's not here to explain, but one question for me was one guide for 9 skiers. My group, in contrast, had 2 guides for 8 skiers. And as I mentioned, in several instances, that was a big advantage. We could split up, and if there was a problem, how we could ski back up to the hut to get the skins, and not a big deal. And there's some questions about complacency, and this isn't just me. I found a couple other articles talking about it, interviewing the survivors. It turns out that the guide's phone that he was using for navigation ran out of juice, and he didn't have a backup power bank. And there was no inReach or other GPS device, so they couldn't hit the SOS button. But by the way, that morning, I skipped over the details in the article, but that morning, somebody was coming out of the Vignettes hut where we bailed out, and they heard calls for help, and within 15 minutes there was a helicopter on the scene. So, but the problem was they had no way to notify anybody that there was a problem, and there were actually 7 helicopters involved in the rescue. So going back to the complacency question, yeah, the weather event was known by all the groups. All the guides were talking about it, and they knew for at least a week that the weather was coming. And it's a well-known weather pattern too. It's not like it was just a rogue thing. And yet that group chose to push on that day. There were bailout options, by the way. They could have bailed out right from the Dick's hut or stayed at the hut. But in the Alps, you're never really far from civilization. The huts are reachable by road in the summertime, so there's definitely a way to get from the hut out to a village, like we did. It only took a few hours to get out to Arola for us. And other contributing factors, the Alps have easy access. You typically take a ski lift, and you're in the Alps. It's easy to get there. And it also creates a false sense of security because of the hut system. You're never really far from civilization. And the huts have telephones, so if you have a way of making a phone call, you can call for help fairly easily. But they didn't have a way to do that. And there was also an expert halo effect. I think this isn't, or again, this isn't just my analysis. The articles that I found mentioned the same thing. The guide had an impressive resume, having climbed Himalayan peaks, 8,000-meter peaks. And so the guess is that he underestimated the Alps. The Alps, it's only what, 3,000, 4,000 meters. And again, there's a hut system. You're never really far away from help. And also because of, related to the expert halo effect, the group of skiers turned out to be experienced skiers. And if they had decided to, they could have planned this trip themselves, unguided. But because they hired a guide, they let their guard down. They didn't bring an inReach, for example, or backups, GPS backups. And there seemed to be a lack of communication, according to the survivors. The group didn't even know what the plan was for the day because that was just the way the guide is. And that seems to be a general attitude amongst guides, amongst European guides, where the guide is the authority, you're the paying client, I tell you what to do. But there's a quote here from Miles Smart. American guides are definitely into giving a lot of briefing. In general, it's something we're known for. And I totally agree with that. The guides were constantly telling us what the plan was for the day and why. And if we need to make a contingency plan, they would take our input and we would have a discussion, a two-way discussion. And also they would be constantly teaching us. Like one time I set my ski down. I guess I was a little careless. I had it base side down, and the skis don't have brakes. So as soon as you take off the leash, it could take off if you're not careful. So I got a little talking to. It's like, if that ski had had gotten away from you and fallen in a crevasse, that would make for a very, very bad day. So, okay, I won't do that again. So anyway, something to think about. Yes, Bill?
What was the nationality or nationalities of the party that got into trouble?
Oh, the question is, what were the nationalities of the party that got into trouble? They were mostly Italian, and the guide and his wife was there. The wife wasn't a guide, but they were both Italian, I think, and there was one or two Swiss, so Europeans. So on that note, if you decide to go, here are some tips. Selecting a guide service, and I suggest an American guide who partners with a local guide. The reason for that, well, some reasons are obvious. Someone in close proximity. I have no reservations at all recommending Howie Schwartz of Sierra Mountain Guides. He's the owner and lead guide for Sierra Mountain Guides in Bishop. And the guide would probably want to meet with you and even spend a day skiing with you and make sure you're prepared for the trip. And having a local guide, I think, is important for the reasons that we discussed. Some parts of the Alps route is tricky. And also knowing how the huts work is key, making reservations, and also things happen with hut reservations. They seem to be kind of loosey-goosey. And so if you get to a hut and somehow there's no room, there are options that a local guide would know. And bail out routes in case the weather turns bad. It's important to have those. and also ask about the guide to client ratio. I don't think I'd want to go with one guide to 9 skiers like that unlucky group. Preparing for the trip, obviously, you want to be fit, and uphill skiing is the best workout, of course, but hiking, biking also, and backpacking would be great. And really, downhill skiing is not that important, downhill skiing ability, but being able to ski uphill when the going gets tough, when the ski track is fairly steep, you don't really have a choice. You have to follow the ski track, and sometimes it can get icy. So being proficient with kick turns and skiing with skins and ski crampons is important. So no one has asked how much it cost, but I budgeted about $5,000 for the whole trip, including airfare and the guide fee and extra food, and doing the touristy thing, going out to dinner. And I came in under $5,000, and also tips for the guides. So I made it with under $5,000. Actually, at least at the time, that was a fairly generous amount. Okay, equipment. I'd say anything from 85 to 100 millimeter underfoot backcountry skis. I used 95 millimeter underfoot skis, and at least for those conditions, it was a little overkill. You can definitely go lighter than that. And tech bindings, I didn't use DynaFit, but there are advantages to using a very common binding in case you totally destroy a binding. You might be able to get a replacement somewhere. And I put here poles, stick with aluminum, because one time I actually seriously bent a pole, and if it had been a carbon pole, it would have snapped. What's that? Okay. Someone in the audience has agreed with me. And boots, you're going to be skiing uphill most of the time, so the boots should be focused on uphill skiing. You don't need burly boots for the downhill. Ski crampons are key. Ice axe, boot crampons, harness. I chose to go with the super light versions of the ice axe and the harness, the climbing harness. I guess I didn't mention that before, but we always had our harnesses on all the time, because there were times when we had to use a rope because of crevasse danger. So it's a lot easier to just have your crampon or harness on and not have to worry about it the rest of the day. Also, boot crampons, I went with the super light option of aluminum boot crampons. Yeah, because you have to remember you're carrying all this stuff all the time in your pack. And of course, we had AVI rescue gear all the time. Backpack, I used a 40-liter pack. The guide suggests around 35 liters and no more. And having a smaller pack encourages you to go lighter. So that's a reason for it. And clothing I think could be layered, all of it, just to save weight. And yeah, you're going to be living in those clothes for a whole week, but it works out. It's wintertime. You don't sweat too much. And this doesn't include other gear that you would normally use for backpacking, like personal stuff, but that's pretty obvious. So that's all I have. Any questions? Go ahead. When we went, it was practically zero, because it was spring. Okay, I'm getting the motion. Okay, it was spring, but I'm sure earlier. Oh, repeat the question. Okay, the question was, thank you, what were the avalanche risks during that time when we went in April? And so, as I was saying, it was close to zero, but still we carried all the AVI gear. But if you had if we had gone earlier in the year, it might have been more of a factor. Go ahead. Yes, the question was when was this? It was 2018. Yeah.
You mentioned that there were other people in the huts often with you. Like approximately how many people were in the huts?
The question was how many people were in the huts approximately? A lot. Depending on the size of the hut, there might have been that many, but it wasn't a problem. We had, as a group, we had our own room to sleep in, and we had our own dining table for breakfast and for dinner. And they also staggered breakfast and dinner so that it was never crowded. It didn't feel crowded. Yes, Sylvie?
The routes usually done in that direction, or is it both ways?
The question is the route done normally in that direction? I never thought of that, but I would think so. I would think so. And I can't really say why, but yeah, that's the way we did it, and that's the way everybody else was doing it. Go ahead. The question is, what seasons do they run these ski tours? And I don't really know the answer to that, but when looking for information on the Haute route, I could see that the guide services run the tour at about the same time we would do it. So springtime. I'm sure the weather is a factor, avalanche danger is another factor. So I'm sure there are hardcore people who will do it in the dead of winter too, but not me. Go ahead, Beth.
All right, so a couple of questions from online. First, what was your longest mileage day?
What was the longest mileage day? I don't know. I just know that I remember that we were done by mid-afternoon, sometimes as early as 2 in the afternoon, but typically I'd say about 3 in the afternoon. And there was a day, maybe 2, that we started with headlamps in the morning. So not a very long day. I have no idea what the mileage was.
Were you trying to avoid like higher temperatures in the afternoon, or why start so early?
Oh, snow conditions, because it was springtime and we didn't want to get caught in slushy, sloppy snow. So I mentioned that when we were skiing that couloir, it was almost too late in the day, actually, because the snow was really, really sloppy near the bottom.
All right. Did you also travel with your boot crampons and ice axes, or did you rent them?
I chose to bring everything because I like to be familiar with my equipment, make sure that the equipment's all dialed in. And also, I like to choose my own equipment. You can't always rent an ultralight ice axe, for example. They're gonna have general purpose mountaineering ice axes for rental because they have to be durable. But it's certainly possible to show up with nothing. One of the members actually bought a backpack in Chamonix and rented everything, but I don't like to do it. I don't like doing that personally.
Probably gonna make your own ice.
Maybe not.
Okay, one comment. Claude is on here and he says, "Good job, Rick. Fond memories. Let's get together when you're next in the neighborhood." And then Mike wants to know, knowing what you know now, what would you do differently next time to improve the experience?
All right. First of all, good to hear from you, Claude. I'll make sure I look you up next time I'm in Mammoth. Okay, what would I do? Well, for one thing, I really want to go back and do that last day. From start in Arola, skin up that same valley that we bailed out on, back to the Vignettes hut, and then the next day ski to Zermatt, because that was going to be the longest day, the longest ski day, and you finish in Zermatt, where it's a nice ski town, and maybe spend a couple days skiing the resort. So, anybody want to go? I'll put together a trip.
All right. Oh,
One
one
more
more
question.
in the room here.
Okay, the question is, how much pre-training did I do to get in shape for this? I was still working at the time, so I was a weekend warrior, and I would spend most of my weekends in Mammoth. So I did a lot of downhill skiing, and also whenever I could get together with my buddies Nyan and Kyle, we would do a day tour and do a bunch of uphill skiing, and practiced when it was icy, and with ski crampons, just to get used to the equipment and to the technique. There's a there's a balance point, right? When you're skiing uphill, when it's steep, and especially when it's icy, you don't want to lean forward, you don't want to lean back. And it's an art. So I did as much as I could.
All right. Any more questions here in the room, or I'm still watching the chat if anybody wants to chat me another question. But if that's it, I wanted to say thank you again, Rick, for sharing with us tonight.
Thank you.
Yay. Everybody, please remember to look out. We'll send you a quick survey coming to your email. And then saying that Peak has a lot of programs ongoing this summer. Please come see us at the Electric Vehicle Show on July 8th. We also have suds and shows and summer family evenings, planetarium talks, lots of stuff on the schedule coming up. This is our next quarter, so July, August, September. Check out our website for more information about all that. And thanks again for joining us this evening, and everybody have a good night.